I'm pleased to welcome you to the course on developing key performance indicators in a company. This is our first session of this course. Today we'll discuss what key performance indicators, or key performance indicators in English, actually are. So this course has a website and this is what it looks like. I'll start with a bit of introductory information. Many companies work with incorrect metrics, and many of these metrics are incorrectly labeled as key performance indicators. It's a myth that all performance measures can be considered key performance indicators. That's the introductory information. Today is our first class. The course itself consists of 8 sessions. Over 8 sessions, we'll fully cover how to implement a key performance indicator system in a company. In the first session, we'll talk about the following. We'll discuss how important it is for companies and businesses to know the critical success factors. We'll examine what types of indicators exist and how they differ. We'll discuss what makes good performance indicators, how to make them work, and what characteristics describe them. We'll talk about how this helps with business strategy. We'll discuss why it's important to look at the past, present, and future, and we'll examine a model that describes an ideal set of indicators for a company. That's our plan for today. Well, let's get started. For those I haven't met, my name is Mike Pritula, and here are the companies I've worked for. I've had to deal with key performance indicators in one form or another, and in general, I'll say it again, key performance indicators are first and foremost a tool. If you understand it, it can be very useful for solving a wide variety of tasks. In your work relying on global best practices, I recommend you track these as well. I'd be glad if you could write about yourself, what position you hold, so we can understand who's interested in the topic of key performance indicators. So please write in the chat what your position is. For those who are already on the course with us, homework awaits you. You'll essentially be going through the process of developing a key performance indicator system. The homework assignments are very practical. I'd even say they're probably among the most challenging of all 5 courses in the Academy. But we haven't had anyone give up or fail yet, even though this is, I believe, the 4th run of this course. With a person's willingness and readiness to accept feedback, everyone eventually completes the homework. This is the 4th run, so you'll definitely be able to do it just like others have. To understand what's what, the words we use when talking about key performance indicators are English words. Here we need to learn to distinguish a few things. So indicator equals indicator, that's the letter I, and it's indicator in English. Result is the letter R, and it's result in English. Key is the letter K in English. It is probably better to say effectiveness or efficiency for performance. That's the whole problem, by the way. In English, there's frequent use of the word performance, like in performance review. The thing is, it doesn't translate well because there's effectiveness, efficiency, productivity. It's typically considered that the correct translation is productivity, but we never say it that way. We only talk about processor performance or some equipment performance. We don't use it for people. This is a problem. So we will use efficiency, although in English there's also the word efficiency, which has its own translation nuances, but we will use the term that's more commonly used to describe a person's work in a company. The key result indicators we will be introduced to today are KRIs. Result indicators are RIs, key performance indicators are KPIs. Why do I translate it specifically as efficiency? Because we say KPI in English, it's KPI and it stands for key performance indicator. So we have a participant here, a head of human resources, executive staff, interesting. There's also just a performance indicator and there's a critical success factor. In general, there are several abbreviations here that will be used further in the sessions and throughout the course, so you can always refer back to them. Now let's talk about how key performance indicators support business goals and strategy. In fact, they are primarily created to support strategic goals, not as it sometimes seems to give bonuses to employees. You know what's the most incorrect way to phrase it? What key performance indicators are needed to motivate employees? It implies that there are certain metrics for which a person can be rewarded. Using key performance indicators to motivate an employee is a very wrong association. I would rephrase it this way. What metrics should be tracked that are linked to the company's strategy to implement variable compensation for employees, noting that the word motivation in the context of paying money is also not very appropriate. All right, let's start with the generally known problems with key performance indicators. Often companies don't have any process for measuring business performance at all, meaning there are no metrics whatsoever, including key performance indicators. Sometimes companies have something that measures business performance but doesn't help the business achieve the desired result. Sometimes key performance indicators lead to inappropriate behavior from employees. We'll be looking at this till the end of time. This is a big problem. I've observed this too. When key performance indicators are implemented, an employee starts to behave differently, completely forgetting about their work and role, focusing only on the key performance indicator and their bonus. Sometimes they behave counterproductively. That is, they actually harm the company just to meet the key performance indicator. Next, it happens that metrics are pulled out of thin air without any connection to the business. Any question like, please share key performance indicators for the head of such department or for the store manager is fundamentally the wrong approach. You can't get anywhere with these questions. You can say, tell me, give examples of what metrics you use to measure a recruiter's performance. That's normal. So examples in principle can be useful. Furthermore, if metrics are only monthly or quarterly, that's also bad because there can be weekly and even daily metrics. There are times when metrics exist, but they're not used at all. For example, important decisions are not made based on them. This is also bad. That is, if metrics exist, the company should react and make decisions based on these metrics, not just accumulate them. And the daily work of employees is not connected to the strategy. These problems exist with the incorrect application of the key performance indicator system. Let's move on. What are the goals of key performance indicators in general? Why are they implemented? First, key performance indicators help a company understand where it stands now. That is, they help measure the business. When you want to end up somewhere, want to get somewhere, you always need a starting point. For example, if I call an Uber, I say I want to go to a specific address, and then I specify where to pick me up. If I don't specify where to pick me up, the driver won't come. The same goes for business. If I want to become the #1 company, double revenue, increase profits, increase the company's value, go public, I need to understand where I am now. And that's what these metrics help measure, right? Right now, my metrics indicate this state, and then we can plan how to get somewhere. Next, another very important goal is to link employees' daily activities to the organization's goals and strategy. This is a very important part. Let me give an example. Companies often ask the question, how can we motivate people, or what kind of gamification should we implement to make work interesting or fun for people? There's definitely logic to this. Indeed, when people have the ability to track their results, they work more actively. Gamification is built on the idea that when we have a number in front of us, we try to improve it. This often works in all types of games, in video games, in bowling, in any game where there's an instant calculation of current scores. It always excites us and encourages us to try harder. At work, metrics are often completely absent, and it's really difficult for an employee to try hard because they don't sense how well or poorly they're performing. Let me give you a simple example. If I want to lose weight, it's very important for me to see my weight. If I want to lose weight but don't have access to a scale, all my efforts in diet, physical activity, and proper sleep patterns won't give me a sense of progress. I started eating less. Well, it seems like I might have gotten lighter, but maybe it's just my imagination. When you have a scale, you can weigh yourself every day, every hour, and the idea of weight loss starts to make more sense. The same goes for running. Running without a watch, without any sensors, is also uninteresting. I went out for a run today, but I don't know. I had a good run. I had a bad run. I ran more than yesterday or less than yesterday. If I have a smartwatch that tracks distance, time, and maybe even heart rate and other things, it's already more interesting. I understand, and I ran better today than yesterday. Or even better, I'm running. I look at my pace, check the time, realize I need to speed up, start running faster, but I also monitor my heart rate and try not to push into the red zone. In other words, I'm more engaged when I have metrics. Many people don't have these indicators, and that's why it's difficult for them to manage their activities and even more challenging to link their work to the company's strategy. And the third goal of key performance indicators is to achieve more balanced performance. For example, not profit at the cost of employee burnout. In other words, a proper key performance indicator system is balanced. There's even a term for it, the balanced scorecard. Norton and Kaplan created it to ensure that companies avoid imbalances on one hand and understand how goals are achieved on the other. Because financial metrics are linked to customer metrics to processes, and processes to people. These are the goals of the key performance indicator system. Accordingly, the key performance indicator system, when implemented in a company, allows linking the company's strategic goals with people's daily activities through a specific cascading process. And here a question arises. I'm often asked if the key performance indicator system is compatible with the objectives and key results system. I want to ask you this question. What do you think? Are they compatible or not? These are two different systems. Are these two similar systems? What's your thought? You can simply say plus if compatible, minus if incompatible, or even give an extended answer on this matter. So please tell me what you think. I'll share my opinion later. Let's start with something simple. Do you think the key performance indicator system can be used together with the objectives and key results system? Are they compatible? So plus if you think they are, or if you think they're mutually exclusive systems, put a minus. We already have one minus and one plus. Okay. Actually, there's no right answer, because the authors of the OKR system position it as a flexible system that can be used in different ways. And the authors of the KPI system don't know about the OKR system because OKR appeared later. I believe they are compatible. I'll explain why. Again, KPIs are primarily a tool that can be used anywhere. In the OKR system, there's an element called key results, which are indicators that need to be planned. And among these indicators can be KPIs, key performance indicators. So today we'll see that besides KPIs, there are three other types of indicators. For now, to keep it simple, key performance indicators are just some metrics that are important for the company to measure. What the company does with these indicators is another question. The company can use these indicators for goal setting, for example, management by objectives. Let's say we have a critically important indicator as an example, our level of customer loyalty, NPS, Net Promoter Score. Some company has determined for themselves that this is their KPI, and the company can set an annual goal to achieve an NPS of 75. So we've combined KPIs. The company can use OKRs. The company evaluates this NPS throughout its entire existence, the whole period. They understand that it's important, but NPS might be included as a key result for some employees during certain periods, while in other periods it might not be included. For example, if this indicator is doing well, it might not be a focus for OKR. So it might not end up in the OKRs. This doesn't mean that this indicator shouldn't be measured or can be left unmeasured. In other words, OKR allows you to timely include or exclude certain KPIs. Therefore, these systems are compatible. Also, OKRs are usually communicated and positioned as a system to focus all people on some common important actions, on strategy as well, by the way. And there are key performance indicators that simply need to be met. It's important to meet them. Therefore, in my understanding, key performance indicator is compatible with any other system. It doesn't exclude, it complements. And again, it's primarily a tool that can be used in its pure form. We'll talk about how it can be used in combination with any other management system. The key performance indicator system doesn't even conflict with Agile, Kanban, Scrum, and so on. There are absolutely no problems here, if used correctly. Globally for the company, having a key performance indicator system helps focus all team efforts around the most important strategic directions of the company. That is, without key performance indicators, the focus of teams can be different. Key performance indicators, when we start measuring and seeing how different teams are performing, allow everyone to look in a common direction. Here's an extended version of how it works. A company typically has a mission, vision, values, and principles of its culture. There's a strategy. The strategy is broken down into directions. There's an option of 4 directions that Norton and Kaplan came up with, and there's an option of 6 directions, an expanded version. Then for these directions in general, the company has critical success factors, which we'll talk about today. And then different indicators are created that allow measurement in these directions. These are the operational critical success factors. We'll be talking about this in the course. We'll talk a little bit about it today. To put it very simply, it's something right that if the company does, it will bring success to the business. What are critical success factors? Each business has its own, depending on the specifics of the business and its competitive positioning. But it's very important for companies to know them. It's very important to find them. There's a method for finding them. We cover it in the course. And based on these success factors, build indicators that measure them. Well, that's how it is. For example, one of McDonald's critical success factors is the same taste of the bun everywhere. Wherever you are in the world, when you order a double cheeseburger there, it will have the same taste, even if it was sometimes a cheeseburger. There might be other original burgers, but the double cheeseburger is the same all over the world. The second, for example, important success factor for McDonald's is the speed of service. You know that you are always guaranteed to receive your order within 3 minutes. Even if there's a crazy queue, McDonald's, specifically this restaurant, will optimize as much as possible to deliver the order faster. Cashiers with portable devices will come out to the queue. They'll start changing things, speeding things up, revising things, coming up with new ideas, but they'll try to maintain the speed of service because they know that speed is a critical success factor. They have about 5, maybe 10 critical success factors, and then they select indicators to track them. For example, they track indicators at the time of order and at the time of delivery. They monitor it, it's displayed somewhere on a screen and so on. Even if you remember, there was an ad, I don't recall exactly when, but it said, if we don't deliver something within 30 seconds, we'll treat you to something. That's how much they rely on this. So let's summarize. What are critical success factors? A list of issues or aspects of a company's operations and performance that determine the current health, viability, and well-being of the business. Not knowing your critical success factors is like playing soccer without a goalkeeper, which isn't a very good idea. Well, I suppose it's possible with strong defenders and forwards, but it's still risky and not very good. Next, we have the Balanced Scorecard 2.0. This is a more comprehensive set of indicators. Well, for simplicity's sake, let's say there are 6 areas in which it's desirable to track indicators. There's a lot of literature on this topic, many explanations. For simplicity, these indicators are interconnected. If you only track one set of indicators, often companies track financial indicators, it leads to an imbalance and a misunderstanding of why revenue isn't growing. and revenue isn't growing often because something is happening with the other indicators. Now let's clarify what's what. We're now going to discuss what kinds of indicators there are in general. There's an indicator that's correctly called KRI. It's often confused with KPI. For example, if we're talking about customer satisfaction, that's the Net Promoter Score, or employee satisfaction, return on capital as a percentage, or earnings before interest and taxes in monetary terms. These are not KPIs, but what are called KRIs. Why is this necessary? What's the advantage of having indicators? Peter Drucker, author of books on modern management, said that management is very similar to an orchestra conductor, providing overall direction and timing while leaving the execution to the players themselves. Performance indicators, or efficiency indicators as they're also called, communicate what needs to be done and help staff understand what's required. They allow managers to provide overall direction and enable employees to make daily decisions to ensure proper processes. This is a transition to learning, as well as trusting staff to make the right decisions. That's how Toyota does it, by the way. Any incorrect decision is considered a learning mistake, not a fault of the person themselves. Delegating authority to the front line is one of the main cornerstones of key performance indicators. We'll discuss this in one of our sessions, that it's very important not only to measure indicators, but to allow people to make decisions based on them. Now, regarding the 4 types of indicators, so we need to learn how to distinguish between them. Firstly, there are outcome indicators and performance indicators, which in turn are divided into regular indicators and key indicators. There's a current trend, you could say, to divide indicators into leading and lagging ones. This is one of the author's ideas, came up with it. Essentially, it's the same logic. Lagging indicators are outcome indicators, leading indicators are performance indicators. Now we'll examine in more detail what the difference is. So let's start with outcome indicators. This is the left side, and we'll start with the regular ones that aren't key to any particular business. Many indicators in a company, for example, gross revenue or simply revenue or profit, these are the result of contributions from more than one team. For a company to make money, the entire company actually works towards this goal. It's very useful to examine how all employees work together, but it doesn't help a manager solve the problem. That is, if revenue or profit is low, it's unclear who to talk to or who's to blame. In other words, it's difficult to determine which teams were responsible for efficiency or inefficiency, that is, productivity or unproductivity. Now, performance indicators, unlike outcome indicators, can be tied to a group or cluster of groups working in close contact. Good or poor performance is the responsibility of one team and provides clarity and accountability. That is, it's clear who is responsible for it. For example, I will give an example that's understandable for many HR professionals. When we talk about the number of positions filled by a recruiter, this is actually an outcome indicator. So this is a result. It can be counted after the fact. It cannot be influenced in the moment. Either positions are filled or they are not. Moreover, the hiring manager has a significant impact on filling positions, perhaps even primarily the hiring manager. Fortunately, there is another metric that truly shows a recruiter's effectiveness. And you know it. It's the number of interviews conducted personally. It's solely up to the recruiter to decide how many interviews they will conduct. They could schedule 0 or 25 interviews for tomorrow, for example. The number of candidates found on LinkedIn and added to a vacancy is also an efficiency indicator that only the recruiter influences. That's how it is. So these are inherently different types of indicators. Essentially, many employees have performance indicators or outcome measures, what result was achieved, and efficiency indicators, what was done to achieve the result. We need to learn to distinguish between them, because if you start measuring an employee's work by outcome indicators, you are giving them a headache. They cannot influence it directly, but they are forced to somehow orient themselves towards it. Now let's talk about the word key. Not all indicators will be key. So any type of indicator can be regular without the letter K, or it can have the letter K. So for example, key result indicators, KRIs. They are needed for the board of directors to understand how the company is performing. Just RIs, result indicators, without the key, provide a lot of information for management to understand the situation. But there can be many of them, and they might not be of interest to the board of directors. Performance indicators tell management what results teams are producing, while key performance indicators tell leadership about how the organization is handling critical success factors. And by tracking them, leadership can significantly improve the efficiency of the entire company and team. So key factors or key indicators are those that are most important. Outcome indicators are usually needed by top management and the board of directors, while performance indicators are for management to make decisions. So many performance indicators used by organizations are often a mix of all different types. That is, companies often don't even realize this. They have many indicators. Some of them are outcome indicators, some are efficiency indicators, some are key, some are not key, and they are chaotically tracked somewhere and somehow analyzed, and attention might be mistakenly paid to the wrong issues. Now let's go into more detail. Key result indicators, KRIs, are metrics that are most often confused with KPIs, but they are not KPIs. The common characteristic of these indicators is that they are the result of many actions performed by many teams, which is why they're called results. And these are good summary indicators, hence the term key. They give a clear picture of where our organization is heading. But unfortunately, it's impossible to manage these indicators because most often we can only calculate them after the fact. And we usually calculate them monthly, quarterly, or annually. So the year ends, we calculate the profit, and we can't influence it anymore. We can't rewind the year. That's why it's not very useful for operational management. It's more useful for shareholders to understand whether we're moving in the right direction or not. Key result indicators will include several examples. Net profit before tax, net profit for key product lines, customer satisfaction, return on capital employed, employee satisfaction, and so on. Now let's talk about non-key result indicators. They show the results of different teams' activities, but the difference is that there's less overall collective work here, or it may be less important. It's also important to understand that any financial indicators, that is, indicators that have some currency symbol, are always result indicators. Well, almost always. Here are examples of key results that can exist. Sales made yesterday, the number of initiatives implemented based on a recent customer satisfaction survey, and so on. There are many examples in general. Anything that can be counted where multiple teams worked will be ARI's, actionable result indicators. Now let's talk about performance indicators. More often than not, we can say that they are almost always non-financial. They can be traced back to a specific team or even an individual. In other words, you can always identify who is responsible for them. The difference between them and result indicators is that the latter are considered fundamental to the organization's well-being. Thus, performance indicators, while important, are not critical to the business. That's why there's no letter indicator. Next, here are examples of what can be performance indicators. The number of unanswered calls in the call center, late deliveries to customers, planned elimination of reports, meetings for processes that no longer function, and so on. There can be various minor indicators here. Now let's discuss key performance indicators, the most important ones. They're about the future. Key performance indicators are those that focus on aspects of an organization's activities that are most critical to the organization's current and future success. They are usually not new to the company, meaning the company often tracked them but didn't realize they were key and so important. Either they weren't recognized or they were collected somewhere but not used in any way. For example, here's one demonstration of a KPI. This is a classic example. It's very often used in business schools, MBA programs, and so on. I'll share it with you as well. So let's talk about KPIs for an airline. Here's a story. This is a real story from actual experience. British Airways, the airline with this logo, hired consultants in 2010 to develop KPIs. After thorough work, the consultants reported to the company, esteemed company, you actually have only one critical success factor that you should track. It's the on-time departure and arrival of the aircraft. That's the most important thing you need to monitor. Please, to track this success factor, monitor just one KPI, flight delays. When a flight is delayed, it doesn't matter which airport it's at. And there are many airports, hundreds for a major airline. So when a flight is delayed at any of the airports, the CEO must be informed about it. Consequently, any local British Airways airport director, who is not the airport director, but the British Airways director at the airport, knows that in case of a delay, the CEO will definitely call them. There are hundreds of such people. Their communication with the CEO, let's say, is not a regular activity, and understandably, they don't always seek such communication, but they know that if a plane is delayed at their airport today, the chief executive officer of British Airways will definitely call them. Here is an example of how a phone conversation might go. See, this is Sam on the phone. See, I am calling about flight name, which left Kennedy Airport 2.25 hours late. What happened? The local airport director responds, D, you will see in the system that the plane was already delayed leaving Hawaii. D, it was 1.75 hours late. D, and everything seemed to be fine on our end. D, but we lost one of the passengers, so we had to unload their bags. D, we did it as quickly as possible in just half an hour. D, and that is why we ended up with such a delay. The company chief executive officer asks the airport director, C, how long have you been working for British Airways? D, he replies, realizing that things are not going well, about 30 years. And the chief executive officer says to him, C, actually it is 32 years. C, and in these 32 years of working for us, you are telling me that with 6 hours notice that the plane was already delayed. So the plane flies for 6 hours and it was already clear 6 hours ago that it took off late and is already behind schedule. You and your team could not do anything to get it back on schedule and instead added another half-hour delay. Honestly, Pat, I am disappointed in how you and your team are performing, and I know you are better than this. People do not like these kinds of conversations. They are often called career-limiting talks. In reality, of course, they contribute to improving efficiency. When the chief executive officer calls about a key performance indicator deviation, people start to think seriously. Generally, when a company has a well-structured key performance indicator system, the chief executive officer monitors the most important metrics and immediately contacts the employee responsible for the metrics to hold a meeting. For example, I observed this in television on the set-top box channel. Television, like any other business, is created to make money. The money that television earns comes from advertising. There is a lot of advertising money when a television show is successful. A television show usually runs for several episodes, 16 for example, and at the end of all these episodes, they calculate how much money was earned from advertising, how much was spent, and what the profit is. So a good TV channel director doesn't wait until all 16 episodes are over and the profit is calculated to say, folks, why? Did your show make little money or suffer losses? He monitors the metrics. For TV shows, one of the most important metrics is the channel's share of the audience. So yesterday's show aired and they look at how many viewers out of all those watching TV tuned into this program. And if it's low, he immediately calls in the show's team the next day and asks, what's going on with you? Why do we have a low share? What did we do wrong? And he knows that they can influence the next broadcast by making some changes. This is just one example. Let's move on. Here, the airport director, after having such an unpleasant conversation, takes additional measures, hires more cleaners, arranges with the airport that in case of delays, these planes will be refueled first, tells the administrators that if there are problematic passengers, announce it in advance, fine them, or take other necessary actions. And he makes no exceptions. For example, if a passenger doesn't arrive on time, we take off, we don't wait. They take such measures and quickly the planes start following the schedule, and the company starts to operate successfully. All this is possible because the company knows the critical success factors. So they've identified them here and everything works towards that goal from now on. In the specific case of British Airways, the KPI for flight delays affected everything. First, costs increased because there were a lot of expenses associated with delays. They had to accommodate passengers who missed connections in hotels, provide meals, and many other things. Customers became dissatisfied and refused to book future flights. Potential customers also didn't want to fly with these airlines. All of this negatively affected the staff who were overworked and had to do additional tasks. And ultimately, it impacted absolutely every aspect of the company's operations. This KPI was identified through careful work, so just one KPI had a huge impact on many other factors. In this course, we will learn to find these critical success factors that influence everything else. So in reality, both in life and in business, among a large number of things, there's something that affects everything. For example, those of you who have ever gone to coaches know they like to use the wheel of life, where you analyze different aspects of your life. Then suddenly it turns out that either your health or your financial situation affects all aspects of your life, and you only need to focus on one thing, and everything in your life improves. For some people, their personal life affects everything. So it's different for different people. So often in life, there's something that affects everything amidst a large number of different nuances. Finding that one point which, when influenced, can improve everything. This is the essence of building KPIs, key performance indicators, characteristics of an effective KPI, what it means when a KPI is chosen correctly. It's not financial, it's timely, meaning it can be tracked not just at the end of the month, but almost daily. It's necessary for the chief executive officer. The chief executive officer focuses on it. It's simple, not overly complicated. It's team-oriented in the sense that you can understand which team influences it. It has a significant impact on the entire company and doesn't create additional problems. There's this concept called the dark side, which we'll discuss in the course. So you need to pay attention. I'll briefly tell you a story so you understand what it is. Once in India, they decided to fight a cobra infestation. You know that a cobra is a dangerous snake. And the government came up with this solution. To protect residents from cobras, they announced a reward for every killed cobra brought in, like $10, for example. This way, they started incentivizing cobra hunters to catch them, so the cobras wouldn't sting ordinary residents. This led to the dark side. Do you know what happened? The hunters started deliberately breeding cobras, setting up incubators, these eggs, larger ones, some enclosures, and they started turning in cobras en masse. Instead of reducing the number of cobras, they either escape or breed uncontrollably. They got the opposite, a reverse effect. There were more cobras in the country, not fewer. This is what we mean by the limited dark side. They didn't consider that the metric could make people behave inappropriately. There are many such examples, like when public transport drivers skip stops, run red lights, and so on, just to arrive at the final destination on time. This is also an incorrect metric. Or when there's a financial metric and they cram the bus full of people and don't take those eligible for discounts. This is also inappropriate behavior caused by an incorrect metric. Well, there are many examples. Here's an explanation of all these points that I just mentioned, which were in the table. This is like a checklist for your analysis. Here are a few key performance indicators that match. You'll be surprised that these key performance indicators are often unfamiliar to you, not just revenue or some sales and so on, but these are certain events, actions, unique deadlines, like in the case of delayed planes. No one would have thought that a company would start tracking specifically delayed planes, not revenue, not the number of passengers, not the quantity of something else, but exactly delayed planes. But these key performance indicators don't come out of nowhere. They're definitely not key performance indicators you can find on the internet, but key performance indicators you arrive at by analyzing critical success factors. To do this, you need to learn to recognize them, learn to analyze them, learn to write them down, and then find key performance indicators and other types of indicators for these factors. This is the right way. These are more examples and more examples. What else is important? It's important to understand that in general, a company should monitor 3 types of metrics. Past ones, those that are already in the past; current ones, those happening today, now, or at most yesterday, because we often summarize the day, and today we can make decisions. And the future. That is, some future actions, future dates, future events. It's also important to include them in the accounting system, work with them, plan them. Why? Because if a company only looks at all past metrics, it's like driving a car while only looking in the rearview mirror. When we're driving, we want to look ahead as well. So we need to think about the future, the present, look at the speedometers around us, and then consider the past. Here are examples of good key performance indicators that are related to the future. Again, these are all examples. It doesn't mean you should immediately adopt and implement them. In your company, you need to implement them by following the right path, starting with finding critical success factors and then searching for metrics that can measure these critical success factors. Here is another interesting example I will give you. It is something related to human health. You will agree that an individual's health can be measured by thousands of indicators. For example, if I were to join a chat room right now and say, "Dear friends, please tell me what indicators can be used to measure my health," people would surely write something in response. But that does not mean these are the metrics I should be tracking. Let me explain why. Because no one actually asked me what my goal is. If I want to become an athlete and run marathons, I need to track one set of metrics. If I want to become, I do not know, a model and have a perfect body, skin, what else do models need? Hair. These are different indicators. If my goal is to live as long as possible, 100 years or more, those are a third set of indicators. Well, there can be different goals. Come up with your own goals. Accordingly, when choosing indicators, I should base them on my goals and what is most important for achieving those goals. In some cases, it might be weight, in others, cholesterol levels or amount of physical activity, sleep duration, or something else. So that is how it is. You cannot just grab indicators because we found them on the internet or because someone else uses them. This can lead to incorrect results. It is like a dark side that can work against us. And in the case of a company, against the company itself. All right? Fortunately, in companies, when they see that something is not right, they usually cancel or change it. Although there are companies that stubbornly persist with incorrect performance metrics. There is usually someone who clings to these metrics. This happens occasionally, though it is rare. What else is important? Once again, about the executives. The point is that metrics should be ones that management looks at and responds to, and management should look at them every day. So the reaction is not sometime later, but continuous. And the reaction also happens continuously. Then people start to focus on it. When they see that the chief executive officer is monitoring to ensure that a certain metric is on track, they find ways to do what needs to be done to keep it on track. Now, a bit about the formula. At least 20% of the metrics should be about the present or future. And there's a rule, 10-80-10. It's believed that a standalone business of about 500 people, give or take, should track 10 key outcome indicators, 10 key performance indicators, and about 80 operational performance indicators. So that's about 100 indicators in total. If a company starts collecting and tracking more than 100, that's not good. And if at the company-wide level there are more than 10 key performance indicators or key result indicators, that's also bad. And in general, it's useful for a company to learn to differentiate. This is key, this is not key, this is a performance indicator, this is an outcome indicator. If such terminology is introduced into common usage, the company will start to work correctly with different indicators and treat them appropriately. That is, there will be no confusion. That's how it is. So it's the same thing, but written in terms of what the metrics are and what they tell us, all right? What's also important is to track all these indicators in real time, not to delay or calculate them later when everything has already passed. This is a small checklist that's useful to follow in a company, maybe for you to check how well your current company aligns with all of this. And now for the homework. This is one of the most challenging homework assignments in this course, but also one of the most useful and effective. So the task will be to select several indicators for your department or the entire company and distribute them across levels. Performance indicator, key performance indicator, result indicator. Also indicate the frequency with which you think it's necessary to prepare a report on each indicator. And here's the template. There's a column where you specify the type of indicator, whether it's a performance indicator, key performance indicator, or result indicator. Then you describe what the indicator is. For example, staff turnover, and you describe how it's calculated. For example, the number of employees who left divided by the total number of employees in the company. Reporting frequency. For example, you calculate it monthly. By the way, employee turnover would be a key risk indicator, and it might be relevant for some businesses. Why? Because there isn't a single person or team that can influence turnover on a company-wide scale. It's the result of the work of absolutely all employees. But, for example, the number of one-on-ones conducted with employees is clearly a performance indicator or key performance indicator because there are specific people who conduct or don't conduct these one-on-ones. Books that can be recommended? There are various books. Peter Drucker was mentioned today. David Parmenter writes well about performance indicators, specifically about key performance indicators. Key has a pretty good book. It's similar, it's close to this topic. Interesting. That's right, Harnish has different views. Let's just say there are people with different perspectives. Right, Harnish is not bad. Norton and Kaplan were mentioned today. We talked about strategy, so Richard Rumelt, objectives and key results. That's why John Doerr is also mentioned here. These are the kinds of books you can read to best understand this topic. With this, our first session comes to an end. In our next session, we'll talk about how to identify critical success factors for any company so that we can then select the right indicators based on them. And in the subsequent session, we'll discuss how all of this is determined. That's all for today. Thank you all very much for your attention. Thanks to those who were with us online. If you're already in the course, we'll meet again in a week. If you're not participating yet, I invite you to join. This course will allow you to understand key performance indicators once and for all and implement them at a departmental or company-wide level if necessary. That's all. Have a good evening, everyone. Bye-bye.